but we are back online. So I'm going to pick up where I left off. If folks can stay a few minutes extra, we will make sure that we're not totally cut short, and I might go quickly through some slides. So apologies, and we'll keep going. Okay, so what we did hear from everybody is, and this includes our meeting last year, the business and intercept survey, and discussions with the garage operator. We heard there's a need to improve pedestrian safety, improve how friendly the streets are around the square for pedestrians through better visibility, lighting, and wayfinding, prevent roadway and sidewalk blocking by adding loading areas, and generally upgrading the streets around Portsmouth Square to meet current ADA standards. There we go. So specifically, we've identified these challenges around the square, and pedestrian safety is called out in blue. Pedestrian-friendly streets challenges are in pink, and general ADA and modernization is in yellow, and then loading issues are in gray. So now we're going to move around the square and show the proposed challenges and solutions by those categories. So we're starting with pedestrian safety, and there are 4 key challenge areas for pedestrian safety. At both the entrance and exit of the garage, there's currently a double threat issue between pedestrians and autos. At Clay and Kearney, the pedestrian crossing phase is not active during the Clay eastbound vehicle phase, and at the crosswalk across Clay, the pedestrian crossing phase is active during the Kearney northbound vehicle phase. I also want to note that for our solutions right now at Kearney and Washington, there was a scramble that was installed on July 14th. So that is not reflected on the drawing, but is in place. So now I'm going to walk through these recommendations up close. So at the corner of Washington and Clay, we plan to install bulb outs and consider adding additional lighting. On Kearney Street by the Hilton, we plan to narrow some of the existing driveways. We plan to install, for the garage option 2, we would relocate a changeable message sign and equipment cabinet, message sign and the equipment cabinet. And in the design option 1, install pedestrian crossing lights and extend the row of bollards. This idea also involves working with the SFPD to increase enforcement of the right on red prohibition. For the design option 1 for the driveway, we would like to see, in addition to the pedestrian crossing lights and extension of the row of bollards, adding a pedestrian median between the 2 garage lanes, and considering additional lighting. For pedestrian-friendly streets, there are 2 challenges. These are basically surrounding the impeded visibility of the sidewalk due to the plaza wing wall. So exiting vehicles are currently hidden by shadows. And then there's also a pinch point on the sidewalk due to a planter and the changeable message sign cabinet. So to address these, there's a proposal to widen the sidewalk between the exit of the garage and Washington Street, to install lights under the overhead walkway. There's also a potential to study the existing community ambassador program to weekends and evenings. We would also be looking to raise Welcher U Lum in that hatch portion, which would be consistent with the Portsmouth Square redevelopment plan to facilitate kind of a flex space where events can happen. Okay. And then considering the further widening along that street as well. So for ADA and modernization, a lot of this deals with upgrading the curb ramps. So right now we have missing directional curb ramps, and the cross slope is greater than 2% across Washington Street, so it doesn't meet ADA standards. Again, we see the cross slope, excuse me, is not meeting ADA standards right now. We see the same over on Clay Street, and then on Walter U. Lum, we see light posts creating a pinch point in the sidewalk, which is also not ADA compliant. So for our solutions, we want to relocate existing drainage inlets and install new curb ramps. And that occurs at several places. We want to refresh the existing bollards. Again, relocate existing drainage inlets and install curb ramps. That's kind of generally what we're seeing at all of the curb ramps. Add the signage for a left lane only for the parking garage. More curb ramps, and more relocating existing drainage inlets and installing curb ramps. Basically bringing all of those ramps up to ADA standards. We also have a couple loading issues. There is one, here we've seen parking observed on the sidewalk by law enforcement and maintenance vehicles. And we are also seeing the casinos blocking the travel lane on Clay Street. So one of the things we talked to SFMTA about was installing 40 feet of loading north of the newly relocated bus stop here at Washington and Kearney. And then we would also work to increase the enforcement of double parked vehicles stopping in the transit lane, and try to work with the casino shuttle operators to make sure that they're aware of what they're doing. So we also wanted to talk about the two different driveway entrance options. So the first really has a lot of those pedestrian safety, both have improvements for pedestrian safety. I would say that the first one, we have an added median between the two garage lanes. We see the pedestrian crossing lights and extending the row of bollards. We see new curb ramps for our ADA and modernization, and we see additional bulb outs and additional lighting. For the second option, we really see just moving the changeable message sign and equipment cabinet so that we open up that area to make sure that cars and pedestrians can see each other better. So here we broke down kind of the benefits of each one. So for the first one, again, we see for both of them, we see improved ADA accessibility, and we see improved pedestrian visibility. On garage option one, we also see the reduced pedestrian exposure and collision risks. Drivers will be better able to yield. We will see slower vehicle speeds entering the garage due to the median. The drivers will be unable to change lanes, so that is something that they are currently able to do that they wouldn't be able to do in the future. And there may be an operation challenge associated with that if a garage ticketing machine is down. So for the cost and feasibility of design option one, the ADA compliance will require some regrading of the entry of the driveway at the relocated crosswalk, but it does not require modifying the plaza wing walls. So for the cost and feasibility of design option 2, it will require regrading the entry to provide ADA compliant crosswalk, and it may require modifying the plaza wing walls a little bit. Okay, sorry for how quick that was. If you could please use the chat box or the raise your hand function. We would like to spend a couple moments taking some questions before we go into the breakout sessions. Eric, could you help facilitate that?
Sure. So this is Eric Young with the Transportation Authority. I've allowed people to unmute themselves if they have questions, if you want to speak to us, or feel free to use the chat function. So I see one question about where will funding for this come from?
That's a great question. We have yet to prioritize the different components of the recommendations. That's what we're hoping to work with you today on. And each of them have varying levels of cost and different places where we can find funding. One of the elements of the park redesign does have some may have some funding that we could tap into. There are other sources as well. And it kind of depends on which types of recommendations we want to see advance.
There is another question and comment. Someone is saying that they're worried about not being able to change lanes when entering. The machine does not have a good track record.
Okay, yeah, and that's why we called that out as part of a potential drawback to that first design option. I think that there may be another way to work with SFMTA to figure out a way to deal with the ticket vending machine if it does go down. But we would need to also involve SFMTA in those conversations to change how the practices currently exist between the ticket vending machine and the garage operator.
I see a question about what is the status of park redevelopment and redesign.
That's a great question. I don't know if anybody from Rec Parks is currently on the chat. The last I heard, it was still in environmental. Sorry, I was trying to scan to see who's here.
Looks like someone is saying this is Mike from RPD. Great. Michael, did you want to respond to that? Okay, Michael, I think you should be able to speak.
You guys hear me?
Okay. Yes, Michael, thank you.
Yeah, hi, this is Mike DiGregorio. I'm a project manager at San Francisco Rec Park. So we are in schematic phase. So we completed concept design, as many of you probably know, about maybe a year and a half ago. And at the same time, we are going through an EIR process for the park. So we are in, I guess you could say, an earlier phase where I think depending on if and how there is funding available for some of these improvements, it would be good to talk to see how we could absorb them, through the process of the park redevelopment. So if we're doing things holistically, and so yeah, we still have, since we're in schematic phase, schematic design phase now. We still have more than half of the design phase left. So we have time to integrate some of these things if it could work for the budgets.
Great.
Great. Thank you, Michael, for that. I think at this point it would be a good time to enter the breakout rooms. And so I'll be sending an invite to everybody to your breakout room, and then you'll come out on the other side with one of the members of our facilitation team. You'll have a chance to give some input there, and then you'll be called back into the main room. Sound good, Linda?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And thanks everybody for dealing with our earlier difficulties.
Hello, this is Hugh. I'm the Deputy Director for Planning for the Transportation Authority. We'll just let a few folks join here, and then we can get going for our breakout room. Give Eric 1 minute to make sure everyone's assigned. I'm actually going to share my screen, and that way we can all be sort of talking about, so if you all can see my screen. So maybe we can start out, if we can kind of go around. We have looks like a small group here, so you all have lots of time to chat, and we can talk about, what your priorities are and what things you think are most important to you. But if we can start out and go around the room and have each of you introduce yourselves. You're also welcome to use the camera function if you feel like it, so we can all see each other. But obviously, if you don't want to, I understand that as well. And I'll take some notes as we go. So why don't we kind of go down the list? So Rosa, do you want to start?
Yes. So my name's Rosa. I'm with Chinatown CDC as a senior community organizer. I actually work with Linda and everyone here on this project already. I guess for me, the category of improvement that's very important for me would be pedestrian safety. Just because there's been a lot of pedestrian safety issues that's occurred on Kearney Street, and it's been something that we've been advocating for the longest time, along with the scrambles, which we're happy we're getting along Kearney Street.
Great. And then it looks like Queena.
Hi, I have the same concerns as Rosa, just mainly pedestrian safety, mainly on Clay and Kearney, because I know that intersection is a bit crazy since it's a connector to downtown and potentially to the freeway. So that right turn on Clay is like the biggest concern for me. And then the second one would be the access to the garage. Yeah. Oh, and I'm I'm the co-chair of TRIP.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself?
Does he have audio?
Should. I don't see a mute symbol, which usually means that someone is able to talk. Peter, are you there? Can you hear me? All right, well, hopefully Peter will join at some point along the way here. Maybe he stepped away for a minute. Maybe just to do a little bit of follow-up, when you say access to the garage, do you want to say more about your specific concern there, or the specific kind of improvement that you think is important?
I think mainly it's for the car's access, because I know the garage just changed ownership due to financial difficulties. Not ownership, but it's under a new operator.
Mhm.
So I just want to make sure that the new design won't be an obstacle for the operators to operate the garage safely.
Mhm.
For both the pedestrians and the drivers who will be using the garage, because it's very important that we're able to try to like keep the garage afloat. And I was wondering, did the MTA ever talk to you guys about the changes they want to do on Clay Street yet? Because they recently came to Trip for some loading and unloading extensions. I'm not sure if that will affect some of your plans. I didn't get.
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit. Maybe let's start with the garage, and then we can talk about the loading question. I just brought up the slide, one of the slides that has the two, and hopefully this is visible enough. I can make it bigger if it, maybe make it a little bit bigger. So hopefully that makes it a little bit more visible to everybody. But just to be clear, so the two garage options are, one, to put a median between the lanes, which has a bit more of a safety emphasis for pedestrians who are crossing, right? Because if there's two vehicles, right, they can cross one at a time and be seen more readily by vehicles. And then the other one, which widen, both propose to widen the sidewalk. And so with the sidewalk widening, creating a little bit more visibility by moving some of the mechanical equipment that supports garage operations. And I know we've heard, and I think there was a comment in the main room that there have been challenges with the machines, which, not shown here, right, but that allow vehicles in and out of the garage. And so the question is, in the first design option, if that happens, how do you sort of resolve that? How do you resolve that challenge? And there, maybe that's something that would need to be worked out if you were going to pursue design option 1. Whereas in design option 2, if one of the machines was broken, you could, travel along or travel back to get in the other lane if one of the machines wasn't working appropriately. So that's as I understand it, the major concern. So I don't know, given that, I don't know, do you have a thought or a question or further question about the garage option?
Is there a way to install like bollards, so they're able to like move freely between the first lane and second lane? Because I do know that there are issues with the machines.
Instead
And
of a curb, say, so something where you could like lower or raise or remove potentially, or
yeah,
they could just be run over if they had to be.
yeah, for like the first option, because I do like the fact that there is room for pedestrians to that little like middle intersection thing in the middle,
The median.
the median.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is nice sometimes because cars, so they're able to get through the crosswalk safely. But I don't know if it's needed or not because it's a short crosswalk. If that
Yeah.
makes.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's. I think Rosa could comment more on that. Do you think it's like needed?
It would be
maybe?
shorter and more. It would be improved in either option. So right, you might be saying the option 2 might be sufficient in your mind. Is that? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like that's what I'm hearing from you.
I like depending on like what our budget constraints are. Because do you know what's the difference between the price tags of option
I
1?
don't have that in front of me. I apologize. And that's something we're still working on. Option 2 would be somewhat, option 1, I'm sorry, would be somewhat more expensive, right? Because it involves, essentially building an extra bit of curb between, and it might have also involved more kind of curb changes on the other side. But most of that's the only really significant change is this bit of curb that's being built along there. And so, that definitely does have a cost to it. But that wouldn't be anywhere near the most expensive item in the whole overall plan that we're talking
So
about.
in the overall plan, what's the most expensive thing that you guys see happening?
When you think about a lot of this type of work, the stuff that costs a little bit more money is where you're talking about reconstruct, like if you have to move drainage and then reconstruct curbs, that actually tends to get more expensive. So, the striping improvements, the paint on the ground, the bollards, things like that would be relatively lower cost. Something like the imagined sort of raising of Walter U. Lund Place to be more of a sort of pedestrian friendly place, which is also imagined in the Portsmouth Square redesign. Those also tend to be a little bit more expensive. Looks like we've had another person join. Ilaria?
Yeah,
right?
sorry, I joined late, but I guess it's not too late.
It's never too late. Thank
Never
you
too
for
late.
joining. Do you want to
Sorry,
introduce yourself and
yes,
tell us maybe a
I'm
little bit about what's important to you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Ilaria Salvador from Planning Department. I've been following. I work with CCDC in terms of some community projects, and I'm following conversation with them. I've been kind of overseeing this design, meaning like I've been in the interagency group and making sure that all the community advocacy around the edges of the park was heard, and I'm very curious to hear what the recommendations are. I'm sorry I joined halfway into the meeting. I had a conflict, but I'll definitely review the PDF. So
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for joining.
Yes, thank
so
you.
we are just talking right now, we walked through as a group the general improvements, and we're just talking right now about sort of which categories of improvements are most important to folks.
My only question, sorry,
go ahead.
and I don't want to throw off the group, but have you talked about the garage operations and if there was progress made around the conversation with the garage, or the assumption is that the garage is going to operate the same way, or?
We're just actually talking about that. So great question. And I'll just bring up back up on the screen, the sort of two options that we've designed. We haven't really talked about, I know that there have been, at least in the short term, changes to the way the garages can operate, due to, the need for social distancing in the current situation. Obviously the types of improvements we're talking about will take some time and effort, and we probably want to think about them as long-term changes, not just sort of dealing with whatever is happening short-term. But I don't know if there's anything you want to add about those proposed, about what's happening now.
The only issue I remember was the issue of the queuing around the park, which prevented people from really circulating at best, creating a little bit of a issue around the edges, and also blind spots at the entrance of the garage. And so that was on Kearney. So that was things that people recorded, but I don't think I'm adding anything new really. So the idea was to kind of rationalize a little bit better the entrances to the garage in order to avoid
conflicts.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, and that's what both of the options have been designed to do. One of them, maybe the first option, is a little bit more intensive, and certainly, especially for people who maybe walk or otherwise travel a little bit more slowly, would be a little bit safer, I would suggest. But then the discussion we were just having is whether or not the second option, which is shown on the screen down here, would also feel safe.
Thank you.
We only have about 5 minutes left for the breakout, so I just want to make sure if there are questions from anyone or thoughts anyone else has about any other of the proposed improvements, anything you saw that either concerned you or that you thought was particularly important. We certainly talked about wanting to emphasize the pedestrian safety. It sounded like that was a consistent message from folks. Any other feedback that you all want to give on any of the other areas that we talked about? Oh, I think Queena, you had wanted to say something about the loading issues and talk about that.
Can you show me what loading changes that you guys wanted to do again?
So the proposed loading changes, let me get down there, are really have to do with a couple of things. So one of which is there's this proposal that was adopted recently to do a little bit of bus stop consolidation on Kearney, which would move the bus stop to Washington and Kearney. And then in front of that, it would install some additional loading zone area. And that would help, we hope, kind of address some of the issues we see with loading happening in the bus lane on Clay Street, because we give a different place for that loading to happen. And then the other issues are really sort of training, education, and potentially enforcement of folks parked in the transit lane. So those are the concepts that were identified to date to address the loading issues that we see. But we're certainly open to hearing any other thoughts that you have.
I know there's a lot of loading or like trucks parked on Walter U. Lum.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Have you guys reached out to any of those businesses concerning those trucks?
Yeah, my understanding of that is that yes, we have had some interaction with the business community around the park, and that there is an interest, as I understand in this. And Rosa, I think you might be able to say something more about this as well. But there is an interest in maintaining that park truck access, delivery access to the businesses on Walter U. Lum Place, and wanting to make sure that continued to be possible.
Yeah,
so how would
talk to the businesses, and they said, they would prefer to have access or have loading as close as possible to the businesses that's located there.
How would raising the street
The street
affect that
level.
loading? Yeah.
So we're retaining there's this kind of curb cut that would run along, and I think the notion is to retain that, so there's a place for vehicles that are doing loading to be able to pull off and still allow the flow of vehicles and people to travel through. The purpose of the raising is really just to make it much more of a pedestrian / shared environment, more than it is to change maybe the uses that happen there. So just make sure that everyone travels through it at a slower speed, and recognize it as a shared space more than a street, a through street, because some people do sort of wrap around to access various, access the garage and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know, any kind of questions or thoughts about that you want to make sure we capture?
I just wanted to point out that Walter U. Lum is actually 2 lanes.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because there's that queue lane into the garage.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how, like, with the trucks and the raised
Mm-hmm.
street work out or not, because I know like
Mm-hmm.
pedestrians will be walking across
Right.
as they do now anyways. So like with the raised, like, would you guys add like barriers so like the cars and trucks don't go onto the streets because they still have that cut out, if it makes sense?
So the notion is that you wouldn't fundamentally change, and we have 1 minute, so probably be quick. You wouldn't fundamentally change how the street works. It's really just about bringing down speeds of people traveling through that space. And so yes, and then you'd be more likely to have pedestrians moving back and forth across Walter U. Lum Place. And so, which I think there is already as people move from the park to businesses. So it's trying to sort of facilitate that and make it a little safer and more pleasant for folks, but still accommodating the travel moves that happen today.
I guess my concern is like if you raise it, then it'll be the same level as the sidewalk. So instead that the cars will be able to like just go on the sidewalk, instead of it like being a safe for the people on the sidewalk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that's one of those things that it requires very careful design. And
Okay, I think everybody is back, Linda.
There we go. Okay, thank you for unmuting me. All right, thanks everybody. If we could quickly go through and report back. I guess we'll start with my room, which would be Chris. Eric, could you unmute Chris Mann?
Sure.
All right, can everyone hear me?
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, so our group discussed some of the things that we would like to see. So we wanted some slow signs right around the entrance of the garage. Something like, you know how when cars back out of a garage in some FIDI garages, there are like, you know, there's like a loud beeping sound. So kind of like a reverse, but for, you know, if there's a motion activated sensor that if a pedestrian passes around the entrance of the garage, there'd be a flashing sign to warn cars coming out. Also an idea that our group liked was Walter U. Lum, the raised level there to allow more flexibility in using that space in conjunction with the park, and also wanting to step up enforcement of the no right turn on red down at the scramble, in addition to some of the other enforcement issues such as the casino buses and the loading zones. Also, in terms of the garage configuration, we prefer to have an option to retain the flexibility of 2 lanes because some community members have noted that the ticket machine is not very reliable historically. So if we went with the first option, I believe, that would take away that flexibility. Those are all the notes I have so far. Sorry if I missed anything.
That's perfect. Thanks, Chris. Room 2.
Is that Franklin Chan?
Hi, my name is Frank Chan. I'm with the Chinese Congregational Church, which is located on 21 Walter U. Lum Lake Place. In terms of the priorities, the ADA, the pedestrian safety, and also the friendliness of the patterns, I think, are important to our church and our members because our segment of our congregation is older, mature, and so those issues are of importance to us. In terms of the whether a median would be installed at the garage entrance, we realize that there's a challenge for the garage to do that, especially when you know, the metering machine does ticket machine breaks down. But I think we'd like to see a medium there because it would slow down the traffic. Also, a particular challenge for our members is the gradation on the Washington Street side where it crosses Walter U. Lum. The grade there is particularly, I think, challenging. And then also the left turn lane from Clay onto Kearney has always been a challenge. I've seen many solutions implemented, but each one of them, what happens is that people get caught, they go into the left turn lane not realizing it commits them to going into the garage, and then they try to get out of it. And then they, of course, run over whatever barriers or things that are at the intersection. And so things that are whatever installed there always, they don't work because people basically run over them. Let's see. Andrew, was there also any other items on the share screen you had?
Eric, I think Andrew's muted as well.
Oh. Okay, so
No, I think he should be unmuted now.
Okay, thanks.
okay, Andrew, did you have a share screen that you were going to put up?
I sent you some notes, but don't worry about it. I'll touch on that. Peter Lee with the Portsmouth Garage gave his feedback about the garage access, and he preferred the concept without the median. And then Dustin White was in our group. Dustin's with the SFMTA, and he reiterated that pedestrian safety is a priority for the agency in this area.
Great. Let's go on to room 3.
Is that my room?
Everyone has been unmuted, so you should be able to present.
Okay, thanks.
Room 3 is my room, I think. And we're having such scintillating conversation that we neglected to pick somebody to share out. So I will just do it. And Jenny, John, and Nancy, feel free to jump in the chat if you would like to clarify or add anything. But together, I think it was pretty unanimous among all the participants in my group that pedestrian safety was our priority category for improvements. And Jenny also noted that safe loading zones are also important, especially for school groups, because it's something that happens quite a bit around the square. For the garage options, we also all preferred option number 1 with the median, but noted that it would be great to try and work with SFMTA on ticketing issues to try and minimize any kind of inconvenience that broken ticket machines might have on people coming or going. My group also noted a couple of other unsafe behaviors that they noted around the square. Especially they wanted to highlight the unsafe turns from Clay onto Kearney, and also noted unsafe maneuvers that folks exiting the garage tend to take, with a dash across the street quickly onto Merchant Alley to avoid going around the block. This is dangerous, and if we can find a way to prevent folks from doing that, that would be great too.
Okay, and lastly, room 4.
Okay, I will do that from 4 because similarly we ran right up against the time. Just to reiterate, I think what is a consistent theme that pedestrian safety certainly flagged as the priority category among the things that we discussed. Definitely something that's been advocated for and requested for a long time. And there were a number of sort of specific concerns about safety, including, I think, the Clay and Kearney intersection, which we heard about from others. We did have a conversation a bit about the garage configuration, and I think folks liked the first option, but wanted to make sure that the the access issues, as others have mentioned, were possible, and suggested we might consider alternatives to the median that might allow the same movement or the same connection, but then also allow vehicles to move through if there are problems, because as others have said, the issues with the ticketing machines are well known. So that's certainly something we could consider. And then the last consideration that came up that we talked a bit about was the way the sort of raised Walter Ulam Place might work, and in particular concern about if bringing that up to sidewalk level might create potential safety issues, and wanting to make sure that whatever design would move forward for that would take into account and be designed in such a way that vehicles weren't finding themselves then sort of traveling onto the sidewalk, and creating more safety challenges, but definitely recognizing the need for that. And also just to note that, making sure that vehicle access for deliveries could be maintained, which I know is something that we've heard from others as well.
Awesome, thanks. So I'm gonna open this to the group discussion now. I do want to let everybody know it is noon. Apologies again for our technical difficulties, but if you can stay a little longer, we'd love to have a brief group discussion. I think we'll limit it to 12:10, maybe 12:15 if possible. With that, I'll just ask the questions. We can all, versus sharing my screen. The questions that we wanted to ask are, what improvement concepts are that have been identified would you consider most important? Which of those are also lower priority? And then lastly, is there anything missing from the list of improvement concepts? And it sounds like we did have some good generation of ideas in our group, so we'll make sure that we are capturing that feedback as well. So I think everybody has been unmuted, and we can also look at the chat. Again, if you could either raise your hand or put your question in or response in the chat, that would be great, so everybody can see. Would anybody like to start? Looks like Betty had to drop off, but she said, I also noticed that cars on Kearney try to enter the parking lane, and when it's busy, fights break out. And then she is sorry she has to leave.
Hey, this is Queena. I think everyone's top priority would be improvements to pedestrian safety. So definitely kind of redoing the grading to help on Washington and Kearney. So it's easier for our seniors because there's a lot of people who uses that intersection, and I've seen like carts, like it's like carts are really hard to move around there for them. So I think that'll be one of my top priorities.
Thank you.
This is Nancy. I want to actually echo what Betty mentioned. There are oftentimes a lot of cars on Kearney who don't make the roundabout, around, go up Washington, on Walter Ulam, come down Clay, and then into the garage. And when there are people trying to, come down Clay into the garage, they zip right in on Kearney into the garage, and they cut into other people. And then there are fights that occur as a result. And so I don't know, I think for a while we had, an attendant who stood right there in the corner, sort of guiding people in when it gets a little more busy. But we don't have that luxury anymore in terms of having somebody there, standing right there, guiding people into the garage. So I'm not sure how we, in the future, moving forward, would do that. Again, would it be signage or something to kind of remedy that problem? Because I can see it as people not knowing too, people who are tourists in particular, not knowing that that's what they should be doing, going around. I think before there was some signage that said that, but I don't see it anymore. Yeah. So that is, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, do you feel like adding a sign that said left turn lane for garage only would be helpful in that regard?
Some kind of signage would be helpful. I'm not sure what the wording might be to make it clear, yeah, because it is a complicated kind of, if you're not familiar with what goes on, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Okay, and let's see here. Peter says that their suggestion to improve pedestrian safety lighting at the entrance and exit because it's too dim during the evening hours, and currently there's only one street light between the garage entrance and exit. And then Dustin also mentioned in the chat, why would we want to continue to have cars drive all the way around Portsmouth Square to enter the garage? Okay, both great comments.
Well, I don't think we want cars to drive all the way around if you know, if there's no one else waiting in line already. It's just that if there's all people coming down Clay to get into the garage, if someone else is going to cut in, that's when problems occur. I think that's, yeah. If there's no one waiting to get, you know, waiting already, then of course they can go right in, but yeah.
Right. Frank has his hand up. Frank, I think you're muted still. I think you can hit unmute on your.
Everyone's been unmuted.
Okay. Yeah, that when people try to cut in, that also happens when people come directly off of Kearney Street. They'll see that there's a break in the solid line there, but that they'll cut in because that's more convenient than, of course, going around, you know, the Portsmouth Square. So that also.
I think a little bit of a historical context for why there's a line into the garage is because during big festivals, there would always be a lot of people waiting to use the garage, and that because of that, the line was created so it doesn't block traffic. So this is, we're talking about the line only when there are big events in Chinatown, like the street fair, or if it's between any holidays where people need to go to Chinatown to get stuff. That's when the queue for the garage is super long, and it wraps around all the way Walter U. Lum, Washington, and Kearney. So just a little historical context for people who are like, why is there a line?
Yeah, thank you for that. That is helpful.
The line, all right, to get back to it, there was also, yes, there was a sign on Washington saying garage left turn, which pointed towards Walter U. The reason why we did it is so, like Queen has said, because we used to have a major backup problem down Kearney Street. And people from Kearney and Clay were trying to get into that the one entrance lane. And that became a hazard. But this is also before we put the scramble lights in too. So that's a little more history.
Thanks, John. It looks like Ilaria also said that the edge condition on Kearney is critical to safe park access, and it needs to be designed to make sure seniors and kids have a safe way to access the park. There are ideas to close occasionally Walter Lum for special events due to the alley condition, and that should be taken into consideration. And then Dustin said, I think it would be safe to allow cars to queue on Kearney. This way they aren't making multiple turning maneuvers to enter the garage. Each turning maneuver is a potential pedestrian conflict.
I think maybe what we might want to consider then is maybe either during major events, whether it be street fairs or whatever in Chinatown, we either get an ambassador or MTA to assign a PCO to direct traffic going into the garage. And that will probably reduce a lot of altercations.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So it is 12:10. I think we can maybe take one or two more comments, and then we'll close up the closing slides, just have our next steps and my contact information. So those will be quick, but if anybody has a final thought that they want to share with the group.
Oh, Linda,
Yes.
would you be able to send out your slides from today's presentation?
Yes, and the PDF was also, of the presentation was also attached to the calendar invite. So you should have them there, but I'm happy to also send them to the group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I couldn't download it.
Okay, all right. I will send them around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any final thoughts? And again, thanks everybody for bearing with us earlier today. Very different way of interacting with folks, but we're learning. So, okay, well, so with that being said here, I'll just share my final slides. If I can. Okay, so the next steps are that we're going to be producing a final report, and then we will present to both the SFCTA Citizens Advisory Committee and the Board of Commissioners in September. So I believe that our CAC, our Citizens Advisory Committee meeting, is the first week in September, and all of that information is on the TA's website. And then if there's any final questions, feel free to contact me anytime. My email address is linda.meckel@sfcta.org, and my phone number is 415-522-4823. And I will definitely be sending around the slides as well. And
Thank
thanks.
you.
Yep, and thanks again, everybody, for participating.
Yeah, thank you.
Another time
Thank you.
in person. Okay, have a good lunch hour. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.